It says the early afternoon. It's 5 after 12 of the 14th of November. I spoke about this in one of the previous videos that I posted about the Turkish C-130 that got the nose cut off and the tail cut off. And I said I remember making a video about a 4-propeller-driven passenger plane. I found the link. Reeve Aleutian Airway Flight 8 loses propeller midair. Mayday. It's a 44-minute clip, but I'll play about the first 15 minutes of it. You'll have it to watch it as entirety. Sit back and have a listen.
There's a way to make an entrance. My destiny.
Ad popped up. Sorry, folks. I thought I'd get rid of the ad already.
19,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean, a propeller cuts a hole in a passenger plane.
As the prop came off, I thought, oh crap, it's going to kill me. It's going to cut me in two.
Cabin pressure dropping. The pilots fight to control their plane.
Well, we all knew that, boy, this is about as bad as it can get.
They can barely turn around.
There was no way that we could have landed the airplane.
Dispatch, Reeve. Gotta get some controls back where I absolutely cannot land.
Turn off the autopilot.
Are you out of your frickin' mind?
The pilots manage to get within sight of a runway,
I mean, we're essentially passengers now.
but soon discover that this landing is impossible.
Brace yourselves, boys.
Son of a bitch.
I wish I'd have called in sick.
This is a true story. It's based on official reports and eyewitness accounts. Fight for control.
Cold Bay, Alaska. A frontier town at the tip of the Alaskan Peninsula, surrounded by the Aleutian Mountains and thousands of kilometers of ocean. Reeve Aleutian Airlines is one of Cold Bay's only links to the outside world. It operates a small fleet of rugged planes carrying people and cargo across the state and beyond. Reeve Aleutian Airlines Flight 8 prepares to leave Cold Bay for Seattle, Washington. The route will take the flight over a wide stretch of the North Pacific Ocean. 54-year-old Captain James Gibson is a hardened bush pilot with more than 25 years' experience flying Alaska's tough terrain.
Set takeoff thrust.
Gibson's flight engineer
Thrust set.
is 45-year-old Alaskan Gerald Moose Lauren. His first officer is 39-year-old Gary Lintner.
Generally, we flew that route once a week. On this particular day, we were scheduled for 5 hours of flying time.
Gear up.
Gear up.
Flaps up there.
Flaps up. Reeve 8 is off the ground, about 2-3.
Reeve 8, roger. And have a good flight.
There are 10 passengers on board, mostly hunters and anglers. Wendy Kroon is the senior flight attendant.
We were headed to Seattle. It was a beautiful day. It was clear, no turbulence. Highly unusual. Highly unusual. There should have been a turbulence.
Pacific winds and the nearby Aleutian Mountains often create turbulent skies. Captain Gibson will cross the North Pacific aboard a Lockheed L-188 Electra, powered by 4 turboprop engines.
They're just an incredibly tough airplane. Stronger than 10 acres of garlic, I used to always say.
Gibson finishes turning his aircraft on course towards Seattle when he hears an unusual buzzing sound.
You hear that, Gary?
I do. Not sure.
I noticed that the vibration that I was feeling in my feet and the vibration that was in the glass was different. And that's the first time I'd ever come across that. And I thought, well, this is a little different.
Hell. Let's have a look.
Yeah, you bet.
As Gibson and Lintner wait for Moose Lauren to report back, the vibrations become more pronounced.
I distinctly remember looking down and seeing my control yoke shaking. And I turned to Jim and I said, Jesus, look at this. And Jim and I are kind of looking at each other across the cockpit. And finally he says,
Screw this. Let's turn around.
Meanwhile, Wendy Kroon helps Lauren check the engines.
The engineer said, I want you to come back and check number 4 engine and see if you can see anything. And just as I looked out the window, the engine went. As the prop came off, I thought, oh crap, it's going to kill me. It's going to cut me in two. But it flew forward, and then it came back, it slapped the engine, and then went underneath.
The prop tears a hole in the bottom of the plane.
and there was a big, huge bang.
Holy crap! Are you okay?
And then, of course, the cockpit gets all foggy, and there's almost no sound. Your eardrums are popped.
The hole in the fuselage has caused an explosive decompression.
Cabin pressure dropping.
The rapid change in air temperature and pressure creates heavy fog, which obscures vision and starves the plane of oxygen.
So when you try to breathe it, you end up getting lightheaded and you can actually pass out.
It's a little disconcerting because the fog and it's quiet. You think, geez, am I dead or not? Oh, God. Finally, when the fog cleared, I saw out the window that we were in a right turn.
A right turn is taking the flight northwest towards the Bering Sea.
And so I naturally grabbed the yoke to try to level the wings.
Jim! No ailerons either.
It felt like the yoke was in concrete. It just felt solid as a concrete block.
At the moment that the propeller strikes the fuselage, Junior Flight Attendant Victoria Fredenhagen in the back of the plane springs into action.
After the explosions, I wasn't sure what had happened. But I got up and got the oxygen walk-around bottle, put that on. I went to look out the right side, and the passenger there said to me, "You don't want to look out the window." And it was like, oh, there's no propeller on number 4.
Wendy Kroon and Moose Lauren are dazed by the incident, but they are not injured.
I had fallen all the way back on my back. So I jumped up, and my first thoughts were get the passengers to the back of the airplane. But I had a really bad feeling. I stopped with one foot still in the air. And I grabbed a hold of the cargo net, and I was hanging on it and looked down at my foot. And, my heart dropped to my feet. Fear just ran through me. I looked straight down at my foot over a hole, straight down to the ocean. I can actually, to this day, see the ocean, that view, the color, the white caps.
The hole is more than half a meter wide.
That scared the crap out of me.
In the cockpit, the pilots still have no idea what has happened.
Jim and I got our mask on, and within seconds, Moose came through the cockpit door and said, "Holy crap, we just lost number 4 propeller." Jim, he said, "What do you mean lost?" Moose said, "It's gone. It went away." So he reached up and pulled the emergency shutdown handle on number 4 engine.
But James Gibson has a more immediate problem. The loss of cabin pressure. With a jammed control column, he can't descend to a lower altitude where there's more oxygen.
Everybody, calm down. Just a second.
Jim saw that the autopilot disconnect lights were on, and he reached over and turned the autopilot back on again.
The Electra has two sets of control cables. The manual cables are jammed, but the cables for the autopilot seem to be working.
Wings level.
And I personally thought that was probably one of the smartest things that anybody ever did in the history of aviation.
Sending to 10,000.
The autopilot is now keeping the plane on a steady and descending course over the North Pacific. For the moment, everything seems to be under control. Until...
There's a hole back there. I can see straight through. Yeah, right straight through the plane. I saw the ocean.
And then they go, wait, a hole through the floor? I go, yes, a hole through the floor. I wanted to yell at him. He was like, yes, I saw a freaking hole in the floor.
Put on your seat and put oxygen on.
Gibson is flying fast, over 200 knots. He's down one engine and his control column is jammed. He must find a way to slow down or his plane will rip apart.
Pull power back to 2,000.
Nothing. When his hand moved those throttles back and the horsepower gauges didn't move, I'll tell you what, I said, man, I wish I'd have called in sick. You know, that's when I knew, and well, we all knew that, boy, this is really a bad situation. This is about as bad as it can get.
The throttle cables must be cut. Son of a bitch!
The pilots can't slow the engines. The speed could tear apart the damaged plane. It's also preventing Gibson from descending as quickly as he'd like.
Come on, come on. Still at 16.5. Let's see if we can get turned around.
Gibson instructs the autopilot to make a right turn back to Cold Bay. It seems the autopilot's lateral control is also damaged.
And if we just cracked it to the right, just the slightest bit, the airplane would start immediately rolling into a rapid right-hand turn. And it scared the living crap out of all of us. And the only way to get it out of that rapid right-hand turn was to turn that control knob all the way full left. And then it would just barely stop the right turn and just slowly bring the airplane back.
Gibson has no way of steering his airplane. He can't descend quickly, and his emergency oxygen is running out. The crew and passengers are flying straight out to sea, with no way to return to safety in a plane on the verge of tearing itself apart. Through terrifying trial and error, Captain James Gibson discovers what his damaged plane can and cannot do.
Okay, stable?
His autopilot has put the plane into a slow descent, but turning is next to impossible. Reeve 8 is stuck at full throttle, flying further and further from land.
Clear an emergency! Mayday! This is Reeve 8.
Flight dispatcher Richard Huff receives the call at the Reeve base in Anchorage.
Reeve 8 had taken off out of Cold Bay prior to my coming to work, and probably 45 minutes after I had gone on shift, they called me.
Reeve 8, manual flight control seized. Heading 104, full throttle, unable to reduce speed.
Is that you, Gary? It's Huff.
No, we've done nothing.
Reeve 8, understand. No flight control. Confirmed.
No, negative. We got no manual control, but autopilot, vertical control kind of working. Approaching 10,000 feet.
Dropping at 10,000 feet.
Okay, we got you.
It was the worst damage report I'd ever had at our company.
The autopilot finally gets the Electra down to 10,000 feet. Captain Gibson activates the autopilot's altitude hold switch. It works. The plane holds at 10,000 feet.
Reeve 8, holding at 10,000 feet. Over. Thank God. It's now safe to remove your masks.
That's a whole lot better.
Passengers are no longer at risk of hypoxia, but Gibson still can't slow down or turn back to safety.
Reeve, you guys going back to Cold Bay? We're working on it. Trying to figure out how to fly this thing.
Everybody wants to know what's going on, so I'm really busy talking on the radio. And I'm watching Jim try to overpower the autopilot or help the autopilot.
The autopilot won't turn the plane around. Gibson still can't budge his column to make a manual turn.
And I thought, well, hell, maybe I can do that. So I reached up and I grabbed the yoke and I moved it.
Whoa!
And it scared the living hell out of Jim.
Christ, Gary, hold on!
He just about climbed out of his seat, you know. And I felt terrible, but now at least we knew that we could overpower or help the autopilot. So that meant that probably our control cables were not severed. And that was really good news.
The pilots use their combined force to muscle the plane into a slow right bank. They begin a long turn back to Cold Bay. The wide turns will get the plane on course, but won't provide the precision needed to land.
The aircraft, being a 1950s vintage aircraft, was not equipped with Autoland type autopilots. It didn't have the sophistication that would allow it to line up directly on an airport in Autoland.
We can't land like this. No chance in hell.
Without manual control, there's no way to land the airplane.
Even if Gibson beats the odds and manages to line up with the runway at Cold Bay, he's traveling too fast to land.
Good chance it would have gone off the end of the runway if we'd have landed at the 200 and some knots.
Gibson won't be able to slow down. He needs a longer runway.
Dispatch, Reeve 8. How long is that runway in King Salmon? About 9,000 feet?
King Salmon Airport is more than 500 kilometers northeast of Cold Bay. It's further away, but has a longer runway.
Reeve 8, King Salmon runway is 8,900 feet long. Over. Moose, if we land at 200 knots, is 8,900 feet gonna do it? No, not even close.
Gibson considers a measure of last resort. Ditch the plane in the Pacific.
Dispatch, Reeve 8. I may have to ditch in the water at Bristol Bay.
350 kilometers from Cold Bay, Bristol Bay is close to emergency rescue support, but Richard Huff is against Gibson's plan.
This is the ocean, and unlike a river, it's got swells and I was totally against of an ocean ditching.
Like the 1996 ditching of Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961, Gibson risks cartwheeling and killing everyone on board if he doesn't land perfectly.
Reeve 8, strongly advised, do not land at Bristol Bay. Oh, no kidding.
In Anchorage, Richard Huff proposes another risky plan. Fly northeast towards home base at Anchorage Airport.
Anchorage International had 2 runways that were 10,500, plus all the medical facilities that were in the area made it a more viable operation.
Reeve 8, dispatch. Considered flight direct to Anchorage. Over.
Flying to Anchorage is risky. The towering mountains rise to nearly 10,000 feet. The 700-kilometer passage would take the crippled Electra through unpredictable weather over the Aleutian Mountains. If Gibson encounters turbulence en route to Anchorage, it could cause more damage to his already vulnerable plane.
Reeve 8, strongly suggest Anchorage. Over. Dispatch, Reeve 8. I heard you the first time, and this will be my decision. Over. Moose, we got enough fuel to get to Anchorage? Yeah, we're good. More than enough. Dispatch, Reeve 8. Confirm weather conditions in Anchorage.
White surface winds 260 degrees at 9 knots at Anchorage.
This thing's a damn tank. We'll make it.
Okay, dispatch. We are flying to Anchorage.
Roger, Reeve. Inbound to Anchorage. Standing by.
By experimenting, Gibson has slowly mastered the damaged autopilot. He delicately adjusts the lateral control and then adds muscle to the column, forcing the plane on a new heading to Anchorage.
Okay, stable. Don't touch a thing.
For now, Gibson has luck on his side. There is no turbulence as they pass over the Aleutian Mountains, but his engines are still stuck on full throttle. In Anchorage, ground crews prepare for a disaster. After 4 anxious hours, Reeve Flight 8 approaches the airport from the west. Captain Gibson carefully adjusts the autopilot and begins circling the airport. His only hope is that he can somehow regain enough control to attempt a landing before running out of fuel.
The controls were just real stiff, and all we knew was that as long as we tried to use the autopilot and manually helped, that we could fly the airplane a little bit, make some turns and a little bit of pitch control.
At Reeve headquarters, flight engineer John Minton is called in to help the pilots find a way to land their plane.
I was walked through the scenario by the people that were already there and asked to help any way I could with.
I'm going to do this in 2 parts. Stopped it at the 21 minute and 36 second part. I'm hoping that it downloads. And if it does, I'll do the second part. Pass it along, and thanks for listening.